Hi there. I am the CRM Ninja, and on today's episode of the Oops Factor, I have Antti Pajunen. Welcome to the show, Antti.
Thank you, EY. Thanks for having me. And hello to all the listeners
And viewers. And viewers, don't forget the viewers.
and viewers as well.
See, this is the reason I chose not to do just as a podcast, but to do it as actual thing so people can see, who comes on the show and the different guests. I think it's a good tack.
Now I'm in trouble.
It's okay. It's okay. I can see you styled your hair greatly. You've got a great seasonal background. It's all good. It's all good.
Exactly.
It's all
Exactly.
good.
Well, the good thing is, I had this background anyway, so I'm not, it's not like I chose it. It's always there.
Well, speaking of choosing, I mean, I chose my background to you because, for those who can't make it out, or for those who eyes have glazed over possibly because they've already made it out, it's a whiskey collection. And the reason for choosing it, of course, is I understand you're into whiskey.
That's correct. Yes, I am. Yeah. That's one of the few hobbies, I guess, that I have time for these days, with moderation, of course. Yeah, gotta make that disclaimer.
Yes, I guess there's the two sides to it. There's collecting it and there's the drinking it, and the two could be tied together or kept in balance, or one side may not be kept in balance, in which case either your collection diminishes quickly or collection just grows rapidly.
Yep. It's a balance of both, I think.
That is good. Good. A balance is good. So how did you get into collecting whiskies in the first place?
That is a long story that'll try to make short.
Elevator pitch, 30 seconds.
Elevator pitch, 30 seconds. Wow, I can't do that in 30. The 30 seconds already gone. All right, so in a nutshell, I used to, in my previous line of work, in my previous life, I guess you could say, I worked a lot with spirits companies, with the biggest spirits companies in the world, and as they were basically my customers, and I sort of got into the finer spirits through that. You could say brown liquids. I guess you could say. So I got into whiskeys through working with my customers, through working with spirits companies, and got to understand the brands, brand positionings, and the values of the brands, and what those whiskeys actually are like compared to the plethora of other maybe not that well known brands that are out there. So that's sort of how I got into that. So it's kind of stuck me ever since, and I became a fan of the stuff. I don't frown on whether it's Irish or Scottish or English, which is very, I guess, rare, or North American or Vietnamese. To me, whiskey is whiskey.
Got it. Have you ever done like a blind whiskey tasting and trying to identify which whiskey it is?
I've done several. Yes, I've done several, and I might, back in the day when I guess I enjoyed more, I would say with my previous line of work, and more frequently, I guess I was able to identify, my top picks that I preferred. But I think these days it would be hard, if you gave me, if you gave me a blind tasting, I might not be able to pick out exactly what you have there.
Got it.
But I don't think understanding what's in there is, when it comes to brands, is the point anyways. I think it's more about understanding, if a whiskey comes from different regions, what are the regions like, and, what kinds of different whiskeys there are. I think that's more important to me than knowing if it's a Glenlivet or Glenfiddich.
Got it. No, that is true. And obviously, if you think of wine, people, will sniff wine and start talking about all the various different aromas and different interesting things that could be smelled within it and tasted within it. But whiskey, I think, is a bit different in terms of that.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I guess you can pick out certain things in whiskeys. I think it's always comes down to individual taste anyways. If I taste something, then you might not taste that same thing. You might taste something completely different. So I think it's more around being able to, if I can pick some things up from a dram of whiskey, hey, great. Or even a couple of things, hey, that's that's great for me, but it's not the that's not per se the reason why I drink whiskeys, is to be able to distinguish if it has apples or oranges or pineapple in it.
Pineapple, wow. You had to throw a controversial object in there. We well know that lots of people view pineapples in very different ways. So
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. So moving from whiskey to the oops factor, what do you have to share with us today?
Yeah. So what's essentially my biggest screw up, huh? That's sort of the question.
Doesn't need to be yours. It could be something that happened on a project that you're on. Let's be candid.
Right. Well, I think it happens, something unexpected happens on pretty much every single project. I guess it's a combination of I guess it's a combination of two things that I would say. I've been out of big scale project work. The past couple of years, I've only been on a few bigger projects as we've been doing more, low code, no code, and enabling organizations to do low code. And I think the oops factor that I see personally there is when we interact with organizations that are venturing into the world of Power Platform, that build fast, implement fast, feels like it has a different methodology and a different approach to requirements gathering. It's more about, hey, we have this business problem and let's just build something. So we uncover, I guess sometimes I feel we start building too fast without uncovering all the facts and all the actual requirements underneath, as opposed to, I feel like when we're on a bigger project, maybe we have a more defined process and a more pinpointed and a more meticulous way of figuring out the requirements. So I think that's the oops factor that I think I feel and see in low code projects.
So I think I definitely agree with that. I mean, if we think of the big enterprise scale projects, right, that we've all been on, we've seen, we know lots of people who do these regularly, whether you're doing waterfall approach or more the Neil Benson approach of being, Scrum and being very agile, there is, of course, the proper requirements gathering. And I think that with Power Platform, because it's about enabling citizen developers and people who are not professional developers and people doing it professionally, obviously there is a place for them, in the right place in the development project. But because we're giving them tools, this essentially goes, go and build, throw a proof of concept together, do it, iterate on it. These are people who are not necessarily, familiar with or comfortable with the whole concept of requirements gathering, or they think, well, if I can just put a proof of concept together and then iterate on it, why do I need to go through a proper requirements gathering process anyway? Because I can just iterate, right?
Right, exactly, and I I kind of feel that, and I understand that looking at myself, when I get an idea for a blog post, for example, and I want to accomplish something. Usually, it's in project operations, but hey, who cares? I want to accomplish something, and I don't really, I might not know how to accomplish that. I have an idea that I usually know that I can do in some way. So a lot of times, I just start building a flow to do, what I need to do to get to the end goal. And then I kind of realize several times during that build that I have no idea what I'm doing. I have to take steps back and rebuild, and then, scope creep. I think of other cool things that I could do on the side where I'm thinking, hey, if this was an actual business requirement, they'd probably want, I could see them wanting that. And, I just build more and more and more, and it takes more time and it takes more time. And a lot of times I, tell myself that, you got no idea what you're doing. It's just like, keep it simple, stupid. So
I love the KISS acronym. It's just so great.
That's sort of what I'm seeing in those low code builds a lot. and maybe that's just how it is, and maybe we, maybe that's the new reality that I might not be that used to, coming, having history with more
Okay.
on the project side, or the project work side. I'm not talking about product, but on doing bigger projects, which leads me to the other oops factor, which is that on one of the bigger projects that I was on, it was not my project. That's a disclaimer. We actually, it was a bigger project, like half a mil a project, and the end result was that the first party application wasn't really the right tool for the for the customer. and
I've had one of those recently, whereby I went back to pre-sales and said, why did you sell it in this way? But we were locked
yeah
into it. So
and that kind of, that was doing that project. It was a while back now, a while ago now, but doing that project was one of those moments where I was like, uh, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, stuff happens. It doesn't always go 100%. It doesn't always get aligned exactly the right way. I guess, the key is to have lessons learned, to take something home as
needs to be a
lessons
playback
mistakes.
afterwards, and lessons learned definitely from each project. Going back to the first one, you're talking about the low code platform. So obviously it's that, you have scope creep and things moving along when you don't do proper requirements gathering. What would you say if I said that the initial build isn't necessarily at the enterprise level? Because if you need to think about scalability, what one person may be building as you go along it may be very different from actually how you would build it to deploy enterprise.
Yeah. To be very honest, I've been in this, I'd say, pretty exclusively in low code for about 2 years now.
Okay.
2.5 years now, I guess. Which is, if we've had this low code for what, 3 years or 3.5 years, which is, it's not like
coming up for 4.
Yeah. Doing low code for about 2 years, and having done more project work beyond before this, the majority of the stuff, I'm just going to call it stuff, the majority of the stuff that we do and I see customers doing is actually to serve the needs of the one or the few, not the many. That's a cheesy. I don't know if you picked that up. That was a cheesy
I
saying
did
related
up,
to
yes.
these things. So it's usually to fit the needs of an individual or their small team, not the whole enterprise. And that's what scares me sometimes, because if they build if they build something, either they build or we build something successfully, and then they realize that they need to scale that thing for the whole enterprise, then I guess we all know that it might not be that simple. It's once it's built for like an MVP, minimum viable product for a team, the architecture might not be able to handle it for an enterprise scale. So I think that's one of the, you should be able to, if you can plan for it, but you can't always plan for it. That's at least my experience.
So do you think that when teams are building it, they should try, in the process, when they're gathering processes and building out the business requirements, which they should be to a point, they should be considering this at all? Or do you think it depends on what's actually being built?
I would always try to consider it. I think the big difference here is that it is between, who's building it. Is it the customer who's building it themselves, who might, not have, well, let me put it this way, who might have people who are on their journey to become advanced makers, let's put it this way. So people who are getting started, it's not their job to understand, architecture the way you understand it, data architecture the way you just, or data modeling the way you understand it. If we as a partner, I'm just generalizing, a partner, we as a partner, or a partner, or you too, you and I are building something for a customer, I think we should really try to look under those rocks and uncover whether or not that app or whatever it is we're doing has, potential of becoming a enterprise-wide adoption, and try to account for it if we can. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. I would aim for it personally, but again, I can't hold makers, kind of end users accountable for not being able to see that if they're not
I think that
actually, if
that
this
really
isn't their
speaks
profession.
to. I think that may speak to having, an internal center of excellence whereby they can see this and then help them all take it over to ensure that it's done in that, scalable standard for it. Because as you say, you wouldn't expect the end makers, frontline business users to be knowledgeable in this and be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I do think, however, that if we are at a point where at a customer where a customer really has an internal center of excellence for Dataverse or Power Platform, we would be talking about a fairly mature customer with their Power Platform and low code implementation. So I'd say that the reality so far is that those don't really exist.
Few and far between.
So I think like the truth is somewhere in between.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Well, Antti, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really been a pleasure to discuss whiskey and app making with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Viewers, we hope that you've enjoyed this episode of News Factor, learned some interesting things, as well as Antti's general love of whiskey. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, take a look at the blog. And if you think that you may like to come and show your own experience, hit the link, which is somewhere in the description below, put in your details, and I'd love to have you on the show. But above all, have an amazing day.